off the refresh of the ESAP this past spring, and have been working with stakeholders to build out really what the next 5 years looks like, the next 5 years of climate action looks like for Redmond. And so my goal for this evening is really just to introduce the framework, what we're calling the 5 big moves to the Commission, and also review next steps as we anticipate a draft plan in the next few months. But just to level set us, I would say that our posture entering this update is much different than it was when we first developed the plan in 2020. We have a lot of momentum, right, from the past 4 years of implementation, a lot of lessons learned, but we also have a really clear vision that's guiding this refresh, and that's thanks to Redmond 2050, and specifically the climate resilience and sustainability element. So this gives us a very solid North Star that we really didn't have before, so that's guiding our work. I think also it's important to note that the realities of climate change are also weighing heavy for everyone. So over the past 5 years, we have experienced some unprecedented events that are reminding us that climate change is not some far-off issue that's somebody else's responsibility, but that it's here, it's now, and it's our responsibility to act. And so with this plan update, we are working to, again, build on our achievements and accomplishments over the past 4 years, and really start to double down and focus our efforts where we have the most impact. So it's our intent with this plan update that this will be, again, that next 5-year actionable strategy that moves the needle towards our 2030 municipal and community climate action goals. This is also our opportunity to realign our work towards the vision and direction that was established in Redmond 2050. While building the capacity of the community members to act, because we know that this is not something that we can do alone as a city, but again, we need the community to do this work right alongside us. And so we have been working with the Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee for almost a year, actually, before we started the plan update process to start to scope out, like, what do we want this new plan or this next version of the plan to be? And we knew, I think one of the big things we knew is that we needed to focus and prioritize our efforts. And so our 2020 plan, Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, actually looks holistically at how we advance in broader environmental sustainability efforts. So it's 168 actions, it's a 30-year plan. And so with this plan update for 2025, we're really trying to narrow that down a bit and focus our efforts on actions that move the dial in these 2 areas. So one is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the other is meaningfully increasing our resilience, our community and environmental resilience to climate hazards. And then at the same time, we also want to ensure that we are building the resilience, underpinning this work, I should say, is ensuring that we're implementing this plan in a way that supports our most vulnerable community members so that they can help lead this transition in Redmond. And so from the start of this process, our Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee has been really keen to ensure that this isn't just an opportunity to engage community members to help inform the plan, but that this is also an opportunity to bring more people, more co-actors, if you will, into implementing the plan as well. And so that's kind of the approach we've taken with our outreach and engagement efforts. David was talking about the need for education. So this is one of the opportunities we're taking through this outreach work. So our goals for the ESAP Refresh outreach work has been reaching beyond the choir. So how do we bring new people into the work? And how do we build ownership and catalyze personal action? And also trying to make it fun. And so we pulled a lot of strategies from the Redmond 2050 outreach playbook, since they have done such a great job. And so we started with establishing 4 partnerships with community-based organizations where we've been able to fund them to engage their community members and again bring new ideas and fresh ways of activating people around climate. And then focus group surveys, all of office hours, again, all of those great opportunities that Redmond 2050 staff have kind of laid out for us. And so we have been doing this outreach since, again, the spring time frame, and we are hearing very consistent needs from the community. And first and foremost, that is that folks want to, they want to know what they can do to support and be a part of this process. And by process, I mean climate action in general. They also want to be receiving this information in different ways. It's not just digital forums, but it's, again, community organizations, their neighbors, and just making sure that they want to hear things in a diverse way. We're also hearing that cost is a very significant barrier. We've been doing a lot of outreach specifically around upgrades to existing homes. And so we are hearing a lot of concerns around, again, the cost that's preventing folks from making those changes. And then at the same time, too, lots of concern around heat, air quality, power outages, and grid capacity. And so all of this outreach we've been doing a lot of data analysis and that kind of thing over the past few months. That has all culminated into what we're calling our 5 Big Moves framework. And so these are the kind of priorities that we are seeing to substantially reduce greenhouse gas emissions and enhance resilience to climate hazards. And so again, these were identified. We have been doing a significant amount of data analysis, and I'll touch on that here in a couple slides. Looking at also best practices across the country. We don't need to recreate any playbooks here. There's a lot of great work that's happening across the U.S. that we've been looking at. And then also looking at our own implementation trends. What's been the pattern of energy usage in Redmond or EV adoption? And also looking at, again, some of the accomplishments and things that we have achieved through zoning code changes and things like that. And then community feedback obviously has been core to this. And again, the policy changes and direction that was established in Redmond 2050. All of these pieces informing our 5 Big Moves framework. And so what are our 5 big moves? So buildings currently account for the largest source of emissions in Redmond. And so big moves 1 and 2 are all about making existing buildings better and building efficient and resilient new structures. Our second largest source of emissions in Redmond is our cars. So the gas that's used to move our cars all around the community. And so big move 3 is all about providing safe and sustainable transportation. So we can get folks out of cars as much as possible and electrify what cars need to stay on the road. And then big move 4 is all about achieving zero waste of resources. And then underpinning all of this is big move 5, which is all about fostering a resilient community and environment. And so before I dive in on kind of some of the how or the reasoning why, I just want to flag a few things to keep in mind because, again, we're trying to enter this process or conducting this process really informed by a lot of data analysis, but also ensuring that we're creating a realistic pathway to get to our goals. And so, we are really fortunate in Washington to have the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which is cleaning up our electricity supply. So in the future, we'll be plugging in our electric cars to 100% clean electricity. But that is not the reality right now. And I'll, again, talk about that here in just a second. So, but we need that 100% clean electricity to meet our goals. We cannot achieve our 2050 goals without it. And so at the same time, we know that just because we have this law on the books doesn't mean that it will be an easy pathway to get there. And so it will be very challenging to reach that 100% renewable electricity by 2050. And so, because we're already seeing it's, there's slow generation is slow to come online. And at the same time, we are seeing unprecedented demands, right, from data centers, EVs, building decarbonization, and our growth, right? So these are all kind of realities we need to make sure we hold and that we're trying to really center as we propose the actions and kind of that path forward for the next 5 years. And I think the other piece too is just to note is, again, there's been a lot of great progress that's happened over the past 5 years, especially with the zoning code changes that happened with Redmond 2050. And so there's just now a really great opportunity for us to scale those solutions and really ensure that they're having the effect that we intend them to. So we have, again, done a good amount of analysis for this plan update, looking at you're using our 2023 community greenhouse gas emissions inventory as kind of our foundation. And we've mapped out what we think it will take for us to get to our 2050 goals. And so the intent is that I'm just going to do a really, really high-level overview this evening, just looking at the data, because that wasn't necessarily included in the document that I provided you. But the attachment, which is our 5 Big Moves framework, has a lot of really great assumptions. It kind of basically kind of showing our work, if you will, of why we think these are the right actions for us to be pursuing or the right strategies. And again, this is the framework that we're using, and then we will be building on this with actions, specific actions and strategies, and that's basically coming next, and I'll talk about that when I talk through the timeline. But again, this is the kind of starting point that we're working to build off of. And this data that I'll talk through next, our emissions profile, is, I think, kind of the foundation for that. So I just want to kind of start by noting, I was talking about how important it is for us to be transitioning to 100% clean electricity. And I think hopefully this can help illustrate some of that, the reasoning for that. So I think the first thing to note is that half of the emissions that come from our community are from the direct consumption of fossil fuels. So that's fossil fuels to heat our homes, natural gas to heat our homes, or the fossil fuels that we put in our cars. So that's half of the emissions. So when we say, trying to decarbonize or electrify everything, right, that's what we're trying to get at, is electrifying our transportation sector, electrifying our buildings, moving that natural gas to electricity is going to help us, again, achieve those goals. But recognizing that we have grid constraints, we want to ensure that we're really centering efficiency first. And so that's something that we're really trying to consider with this, is how do we reduce the demand first, so make things much more efficient by upgrading our buildings or reducing the vehicle miles traveled in the first place. And then what remains is what we would focus on electrifying. And then in contrast, as I noted earlier, that transition to renewable electricity is important. So if we electrify all of the emissions from the transportation and building sector, and we move that to clean electricity in the future, that's the intent. But we know right now, 40% of our community emissions actually come from the electricity consumption in our buildings, because our electricity supply still isn't clean. And again, that will take time. But we can be good partners as our utility works to make that transition. So that means that we can, again, promote efficiency, reduce that demand in the first place, and then also be more sophisticated in how we're using our energy and help our community do that. So that means, using energy at lower peaks, basically not during peak periods when our fuel or the electricity fuel is generally a little bit dirtier, or starting to integrate smart grid technologies like solar and energy storage, for instance. And so those are the strategies and actions that we're thinking about as we start to build this out. So again, when we talk about buildings and transportation, that is the largest source and the biggest focus that we're really looking at in terms of just this mitigation side for this plan update. And then a smaller source of emissions for Redmond is around waste and then kind of other. This is like refrigerants and transmission loss and things like that. And so this accounts for about 8% of our emissions in our community. And here, the opportunities that we're really looking at are how do we just avoid consumption in the first place, or kind of minimize consumption. So supporting reuse economies and things like that. Our construction and demolition debris recycling policy, for instance, is a great example of that. And then also looking at alternative ways that we can dispose and recycle. So again, this is on the mitigation side. A whole large other part and focus of the plan is also on how do we create a more resilient community. Obviously, there's no metrics or GHG emission profiles for those. But again, just trying to demonstrate the how, the why we are focusing in these areas, and why these big moves were selected. And again, a lot more detail was included in that 5 Big Moves framework document, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that. And so again, I wanted to start with just this, the foundation for this conversation, because what's next is, again, we've been talking with community members. We've introduced the 5 Big Moves framework and gotten feedback on, hey, what are the actions and ways that you want to be contributing to these 5 big moves? And we're now working to build out and identify what those actions are. And so we will be, kind of our next milestone is reviewing those draft actions with council on September 23rd. And then releasing a draft of our plan in October. And so the intent tonight is that just, again, we're laying that foundation. So when the actions come out, you all have kind of the basis for okay, why are they focusing in these areas? Why are these the priorities that they're looking at? And we are, trying to work towards plan adoption by council in December. That's our target. Yeah, we're clipping along quickly, but but thus far we've had really great feedback on the 5 big moves. And again, community feedback has been really consistent in those themes that I mentioned. And so we're really just trying to figure out the best ways that we can support the community and reflecting that in the actions. So, so with that, I can open it up for questions.
Actually, can we go back to the schedule for just 1 second? I just wanted to clarify our role here tonight. So we are not actually, this isn't one of those plans where we are sending a recommendation to council. This is one of those plans where we all care a lot. And so Jenny's coming to brief us because we want to know. And so we, like you'll notice there aren't any planning commission dates on that timeline. It's because we're not actually in the path. It's just, we're stakeholders, we care. And so this is like a conversation more than our typical issues matrix and then sign off sort of situation. Okay. So with that, we can go to questions. Commissioner Van Nymen.
This is a very exciting document. I just had a few things in reading it that I thought they're not questions to you as much as like things that I thought you could clean up in the, so the first is number 4. And I know these are summaries. This is just you're trying to summarize a much larger document that you're going to be targeting. But I didn't really follow this paper is a bigger issue in terms of weight, 4% more than food. Like I don't really understand what that means. 40% the greenhouse gas emissions, 40%. I don't know. I would clean that up so that people like me can understand. And then I also don't really understand the composting. You're going to try and bring it closer so that it's not quite as centralized. Is that the composting discussion there? Composting is a 68% reduction in greenhouse gases when done at a central facility. Only a 68% reduction? Reduction from what?
Great questions. So I think one thing to note is that, so through this process, we were able to do more data analysis than we have in the past. And so just in kind of looking at our waste characterization, so it's basically like what makes up our waste stream and things like that, we were able to learn that, we all focus on organics or compost because when organics go to the landfill, they produce methane, right? And so they're noted as a source of GHG emissions. But we actually found that paper is a really big issue for us that we didn't realize. So that's the intent of that note. So it's just more like a consideration for us. It's not to say that it's necessarily going to be like an action. It's just like, hey, this is a data point that we didn't know before that we're trying to kind of, again, integrate into some of our thinking and, again, educate the community too, because it was new information for us, was the intent with that. And then also noting, the composting stat, I totally understand how that's confusing. That's just basically in contrast to backyard composting, for instance. So it's just, again, trying to illustrate, hey, here are some things to think about was the intent with this. So I totally appreciate your comments there. So.
And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about was number 5. I'm confident there's been a lot of people who sat around rooms and discussed this point, but I would prefer a stronger word than foster. Like you used it once already, you said create. And create seems a little bit more action-oriented to me than fostering. And then just that first sentence there under why is this a big move, the topics within big move, I would add in a number sign there because that was a little confusing to read. I had to read it a couple times before I understood what we were saying there.
Thank you. Right, commissioners, other comments? And I think we're going to basically do, if you can do one idea, and then we'll go around, and then we'll try to keep to timing. Commissioner Kanye.
So I'm looking at the slide that talks about the 2 main goals, and you said that it's both of those are on the pillar of uplifting our most vulnerable communities. I'm super interested in understanding like the specifics of what that means. Are vulnerable communities like seniors who can't leave the house in a heat wave? Are they folks who can't afford, things inside supportive housing, and specifics on what that looks like with this plan to uplift those communities?
Yeah, I can tell you that, so we, as part of our last plan, we did a climate vulnerability assessment to better understand who are our vulnerable populations in Redmond. And so through that, we found exactly what you noted. So elderly, folks who are living alone, the folks with young kids in the homes, and low-income community members. So that's generally how we've been kind of looking at vulnerable populations. And so how that looks in practice, I think a great example is our Energy Smart East Side program. So that's our residential home electrification program. So we have a whole program of the majority of our budget actually goes towards low-income community members and seniors to help them install heat pumps. And so we do full cost coverage heat pump installations. So that's just like one example of how, again, we're centering equity, and that was foundational to the design of that program. We just did an air purifier giveaway, again, only targeting low-income community members and those who are connected to some of Hope Link's programs. So again, it's really like the lens in which we're trying to do this work, and again, foundational to how we implement all of the strategies and actions.
Right. I'm going to jump in with one question about outreach. I don't know if you've pursued this at all, but I'd love to encourage you to look at the schools as an avenue for outreach. And there are a couple of different ways that would potentially happen. Middle school and high school students have a mandatory science, like a mandatory state requirement that their science classes have a climate unit each year. And what I've increasingly heard from middle school and high school students is that they find it very depressing because it tends to be global or regional, but they don't see much opportunity for impact for themselves in here. And it seems like if you're looking for like ways to get action items out into community members who desperately want them, this is an age group that's really looking for ways to help. And not be depressed. Good point. And so I know any curriculum changes have to go through the district. So that is one avenue. Another is both PTAs and individual schools have sustainability councils. So there are a lot of parents trying to get information to people who want to use them. And that might be an additional avenue to consider, because I think there are a lot of people looking for real ways to help. And if you have a data-focused way of doing it in their neighborhood, I think there would be a lot of interest in that. All right, that was my comment. Commissioner Coleman.
Again, thanks for coming in and walking through this with us. When I was looking through, I'm on big move number 3 because I think we've touched on a couple of the others. And I'm curious about the particulars around it, how it's connected to the transportation master plan. So I see some things in that, like I think it's TR19 that's in here that talks about that sort of full suite of transit options to get to light rail, etc. And in this document, it sort of covers, I think, 3 things. One is expand access to shared mobility options to support first mile, last mile, increase citywide frequency of transit services, and then I think expand access to shared mobility or commute trip reduction programs. There's a lot of kind of language in here, and I don't see quite precisely how these 2 things come together. With the, if I could sort of sum it up, is how does this connect with the transportation plan in relation to getting people to light rail quickly, efficiently, with better kind of transportation opportunities closer to where they live, not just in the last mile, but in other parts of Redmond?
Yeah, the TMP, so we worked hand in hand with the team to make sure, one, that the modeling reflected, that was saying the same thing basically, or we were using the same assumptions, and also to ensure that we're pulling in the right priorities. So the TMP has all of the details, and that's the vision. And so what we're pulling in here into the ESAP is going to be the really the high priorities, especially for the next few years. And then also we're trying to fill in some of the gaps. So the TMP is really focused on the VMT reduction side, which we are as well with this plan, but we also want to complement that with, again, whatever vehicles are left, we want to help to electrify those vehicles. And so that's really where we see the ESAP kind of, I would say like pulling in the remainder of the pieces, right? But they are definitely working hand in hand. And I'd say what you're going to see in the ESAP, since this is that 5-year action plan, are the really high priorities, not high priorities, but the things that are especially aligned with these GHG reduction targets and the resilience piece.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I think for me, it's primarily that connection on the last mile transportation. We've talked about it a lot in other places. So just for me, it just wasn't precise enough. I couldn't kind of work out what the not the connection, but what the real focus is here. So thank you.
Vice Chair Wood here.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. As you think about, I love the big moves and its alignment with sustainability. I think it's fantastic. As you think about, as you spoke about the community and stakeholder engagement, does that also include the developer community and cost modeling?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, so we specifically actually last month hosted a focus group with developers too, just to understand like, hey, what are some of the challenges and that kind of thing that you're experiencing to make sure, and we'll be doing targeted, once we have the draft actions out as well, a more targeted outreach with them. Yeah, just because they're not going to be coming to some of our, office hours and things like that, right?
So that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they're a critical stakeholder for all of this. Yeah.
Commissioner Gagne.
I love what you were talking about with the funding that you have to help support replacement of the heat pumps. The question I have about is where that funding comes from. Is that from the city budget? Is that grant related? Is there any risk of that funding being lost from federal stuff, or is that built within the city budget?
Yeah, so that program is funded through mostly state grants and city budget. And so, but I mean, one of the pieces too, even Mr. Morton mentioned too, is identifying funding, long-term funding. So that's one, as we're kind of internally developing the actions, that is certainly one that we're looking at too, is how do we identify more diverse funding opportunities to ensure that, again, we can scale these programs and have the impact. Because again, we've been very successful in earning grants for Energy Smart East Side, but it still is not nearly enough of what we need. So, but most of those state grants are funded through the Climate Commitment Act.
So I had a clarification and then a question. So everything in this document with the big 5 moves is for the next 5 years?
Correct.
Okay. So, which is amazing, because I was reading through and I was just like, I really kind of want all of this as soon as possible for Redmond. That would be great. The thing that I couldn't, and this is probably just not in the summary, it's probably in the data that you have already, but it's not clear to me reading this what the blockers are. Like, is there budget to address this? And is there existing budget, or would it be budget later that hasn't been approved yet? Like, do we have all of the solutions that we need? Have they been invented? Are they commercially viable? Like, can the city actually procure them? That's not obvious to me for some of them, especially like in 4 and 5, I was just like, wow, some of these are great, but they seem really far out. So maybe not, maybe they're ready, but is it a political will thing? Like, do we have land? Do we need land? Does it rely on like some of the recycling and compost seem more like state or regional things that we're really downstream from? So is that maybe we're lobbying up? So just it being a little bit more clear, like what the blockers are for each of these would make them much more actionable, I think. Because then people know where to focus their efforts. Vice Chair Wood here.
Yeah, as you were just speaking, it just kind of occurred to me, like there's a lot of, this is awesome, but there's a lot of complexity that impact the implementation. Would it be appropriate in this document to talk about trade-offs that need to be considered? Should some of the execution, because there's a lot of unknowns as well. So a policy that, unless we have a high confidence that we can execute over the next 5 years, it doesn't carry a lot of weight. So how do we, is it appropriate to talk about how we mitigate that in this document, or do we wait to the next document to do that?
Yeah, or maybe like the way that I saw it when I was thinking about it, because I think it's really easy to be like, that's too hard, or that's not possible, or we're not going to get all of these. But instead being like, being able to group it in a more positive, like, here's how we actually, here's what we need to overcome to get to this one. Here's what we need to overcome to get to that one. In a way that's a little bit more scorecarded, I think would help people prioritize, because there's so much here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Commissioner Coleman?
When I sort of read this the other day, the thing I was trying to navigate was how from a modeling perspective, when you're looking at so numbers 1 and 2, one's about existing buildings, and the next one's about new buildings, and how you've rolled in both the growth of the city over this period of time, because there's just more buildings and probably more emissions, right? How do you, I'm just curious, like, how you've modeled that, as well as what's the expectations for existing homes and the incentives for people to reduce that? Hopefully, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just like we're going to be much bigger. How do we think about just overall the numbers? Is it per building, or is it in total?
Yeah, so we did, and you'll, just using new construction as an example. So through some of the projections from Redmond 2050, and then looking at our current energy code and that kind of thing, we were actually able to start to quantify the benefits of the green building requirements, for instance, that were put into Redmond 2050. And I did not do that. This was our really talented consultant who's very good with data and publicly available, data sets. So, but that's kind of when I note that we're trying to bring more nuance to our implementation and just not be so like, yes, we're going to electrify everything and it'll be great. It's like, we're going to try, we're going to do our best. And we recognize, that we are adding 33 million square feet over the next, however many years. And these are big challenges. And so acknowledging that, and acknowledging too, again, how important it is. We can't just electrify everything. We need to focus on efficiency. We need to focus on how we bring more, grid modernization or sophisticated kind of load shifting strategies. So how can we help businesses do that, or buildings do that? How can we work with PSE to bring some of these technologies to our community? And so I just want to note too, this is intended to be, again, this is like the foundation, right? We are building the skeleton of the different actions. And some of it may be, it's like exploring opportunities for this. It may not be that we are getting, this million megawatt hours of renewable energy on our buildings in Redmond or anything like that, right? But just trying to establish, okay, here are the things we know we need to be doing, and yeah, again, creating that framework. So when we bring this back to the community, so we have this document that's the high-level summary. It will be the specific actions that we say, okay, here are the things that we as, the city and the community say, we think that this is the right set of actions for the next 5 years. And then there will be an element of hey, some of this may not be fully funded as well. So to your question, yes, the blockers are going to be funding. That will be a challenge for ever, I think, to be perfectly honest. But we're certainly going to be doing as much as we can with the capacity and resources that we have, so.
I think putting half an hour for this plan was not really fair to the commission as a whole, but I am going to be mindful of the time. So if people have additional questions that they would like, we're going to collate these into a list. So just all of the planning commission feedback is in one place. If you have additional questions that you would like to send through writing, email is always great, and it can go to Jenny. Great. So it can go to Jenny. Thank you for coming in. All right. Next up is our briefing on the General Government Facilities Plan. And this is with Cameron Zapata.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. All right, thank you so much. My name's Cameron Zapata. I'm a senior park planner in the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm here to give an introduction on the General Government Facilities Plan, also referred to as the Capital Facilities Plan. It won't be as in-depth as Jenny's presentation, but it's a high-level overview. And this has not been a one-person show. I've been working with Glenn Coyle and Quinn Kuhnhausen, our facilities manager, for them to provide their expertise. So I just wanted to mention their names, give them a shout out for all of their help and expertise. And then we've also been, we wouldn't have gotten to this point without the help of our consultants makers, as they've been helping to guide us through this process. So a lot of help from everyone. So why are we here today? I wanted to highlight 3 goals. So we'll first review the Planning Commission's role to evaluate functional plans, the general government facilities plan is a functional plan to Redmond 2050, and then how it relates to the overall planning process. We'll then provide an early look at the GGFP, focusing on the high-level direction. And then lastly, I'd like to gather any questions or concerns that you have in preparation for the upcoming study session that's anticipated for September 24th, and then the public hearing scheduled for October 8th. So your input now will help us to make sure that those conversations are well informed. Oh, yeah, I do want to note that we did have to change up some of the dates, so they will be different from what you saw. So yeah. So what is your role in the review of the GGFP? It is considered an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And as a reminder, the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan does reference the capital facilities plan, which we are now calling the general government facilities plan. So this is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, which is a type 6 process as described in the Redmond zoning code 2176. And it is a requirement to go through the Planning Commission for recommendation to the City Council. The Commission's review, or the Planning Commission's review and recommendation is based on criteria set in the Redmond zoning code 2176070J for a comp plan policy amendment. And when this item comes back later in the next couple of months, staff will include our analysis whether the plan meets or does not meet the criteria, and that will be submitted as part of your packet. Additionally, the capital facility, or CF2, which requires that the plan include the necessary components to satisfy the minimum requirements of the RCW 70.070C or 3 for capital facilities planning requirements. And again, when this item does come back in the next couple of months, staff will include the analysis of whether it meets these criteria or not, and that will, again, be part of your Planning Commission packet. And the project goals. This plan looks ahead to 2050. It'll align with the capital facility needs with the city's comprehensive plan growth targets as a requirement of the RCW. And it identifies where new or expanding facilities may be needed and their capacity requirements, which is another requirement of the RCW. The plan will include a financing analysis and how these facilities could realistically be funded within projected resources, with an outline of public funding resources. It'll also provide updates, or it also updates accounts for any changes since 2019, which was when our last conditions facilities report was, including current facility conditions and our evolving department needs. So the Capital Facilities Plan 2025 to 2030, this should sound familiar to you. The GGFP is an update to the recently adopted Capital Facilities Plan 2025 to 2030. It was adopted as part of Redmond 2050, and this basically shows where the projects are and where the revenues come from. So this slide shows what the GGFP does and does not do. So on the left, it does not, it doesn't plan the, it doesn't evaluate day-to-day operations outside of facilities context. It focuses only on the buildings. It doesn't solve today's maintenance issues. It doesn't design for facilities or produce any construction documents. It's a high-level planning document, so no design or engineering is part of this plan. And lastly, it doesn't guarantee funding, rather it provides the groundwork to inform those future budgeting decisions. And on the right, we have what it does. What the plan does do, it does analyze operational efficiency relating to these facilities. And it looks forward to our anticipated growth and change, and it aligns with Redmond's long-term comprehensive plan. And it builds consensus, providing decision makers with information, and ultimately supports conversation about the future funding needs. And it is important to note that we do have functional plans for parks, transportation, and utilities. And this GGFP serves that same role for city facilities. It does get a little confusing because we do have our park plan, our fire functional plan, and public safety plan, which do include some of those general government facilities that are included in this GGFP. This is because our facilities team, they're the ones who maintains those spaces. And the facilities team is within the Parks Department, which is why I'm bringing this to you. And it's budgeted through the Parks Department as well. All right, project understanding. So what is a general government facility? It's any city-occupied building that's maintained by our facilities team, which also includes like our fire stations and the fire district 34 stations. So that includes 32 buildings on 13 different sites, totaling approximately 500,000 square feet of building. It doesn't include any non-city occupied facilities, Parks and Rec historical properties, ancillary buildings within the parks, water, wastewater, and stormwater facilities, transportation networks, or schools. This image gives a quick overview of our facilities, basically showing our buildings were constructed from 1952 to 2005. And this is from our 2019 Facility Strategic Management Plan. So it is a little dated. You won't see like the Redmond Senior and Community Center on this. And it's also showing that 73% of these facilities will require some sort of investment by 2030 to address any functional or building issues. And that's seen on the right-hand side. And here's just a sneak peek, high-level sneak peek of what is to come to the Planning Commission at the study session for September 24th. And so here we have the funding resources, this plan, which are the general fund, real estate, excise tax, grants, bonds, impact fees, developer contribution, partnerships, and philanthropy. And then the plan will break down the project into 4 different buckets. And it is consistent with our 6-year CIP, or capital improvement projects plan. And so the timing looks a little odd. It's not on like decades. So our near term, which is now to 2032, this includes 50 projects. This is also our CIP timing. That's the 6 years that we're in right now. And so the middle term or medium term is 2033 to 2040, including 26 projects. We have our long-term projects from 2041 to 2050, including 17 projects. And then 2050 and beyond has 6 projects for a total of 99. And then so here is our timeline, noting again, it's going to be different from the PowerPoint in your packet, but we anticipate coming back to Planning Commission for the study session on September 24th. and then again on October 8th for another study session and public hearing, and then again on October 22nd for a potential another study session and recommendation with the goal to get this adopted by council on December 2nd. And so our ask from Planning Commission today is to seek any early questions or feedback. What information will be helpful for your review? And is there anything specific that you'd like information on? How can we help you in your review?
Right. I'm going to jump in. I don't usually go first, but I am this time because I have a question just about how this plan fits in, and it's possible other commissioners do too. Is this a replacement for the capital facilities plan that exists, or is it a subset, or is it additional?
It's a,
If you go back to the slide of the plans, maybe even go back one more to the previous, this one.
Yes.
So this was done just to align with the CIP and budget that was being developed last year. And it's only for a 6-year period. At the time, we didn't really have the time or resources to develop that out to 2050. So essentially, this is a phase 2 of this plan. We just have a new name for it. And what the idea is that the timeline is extended out to the year 2050. With that said, also another year or so has passed as we've worked on this. So I don't even know what name we're calling it right now, the 27 to 50, because we're going to align that with the next CIP and budget process, which is actually going to begin this fall.
Okay, that's helpful.
Our budget process kind of takes almost a year, so.
Right. I think I was getting confused by the name change. And then which element or elements of the comp plan does this map to?
As noted, maybe if you go back to the very first slide, this is adopted by reference into the capital facilities element.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, so now now that I'm grounded, we can open it up to other questions. Commissioner Copley.
Thanks for being here, Mrs. Zapata, and thanks for the helpful overview. I had a question about whether the 73% of buildings that you referenced that would need some sort of improvement by, I think it was the year 2030, if that was correct, might present an interdepartmental opportunity to help realize some of the goals that Ms. Liebrecht just showed, namely her first goal of making the existing buildings better, or whether those are just, fixing roofs and things like that. Not to say that couldn't be an opportunity too.
thank you.
I can add that there is an environmental sustainability component. And I would actually reference back to policy CF2 and the capital facilities element, which lays out some of the components that go into the plan, which includes environmental sustainability. But we'll provide a more thorough answer.
And maybe in the next packet, if we could ever link back to the capital facilities element, because I'm not sure everyone who's currently on the commission saw that.
Yeah, it was adopted as part of Redmond 2050, so Planning
Right.
Commission gave a recommendation and review on that last year.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Coleman.
I had 2 quick questions. One was 73% is a really precise number. I was just wondering how it was calculated, because you were saying that the second part of it is on the facility portfolio snapshot. I'm looking in there and going, oh yes, that, as you were saying, like some of these things, like the senior center isn't actually here anymore. So is it possible to update that? I was wondering if you could update that. So curious where that 73% comes from as a number.
I can't regurgitate how that's calculated, but this is from the previous iteration of the capital facilities plan. But in the next presentation, when we do have that kind of calculation of what the needs are for the buildings, we can provide a better way of how it's calculated if we do have something like that.
And will there be an update on because I think it's 2019 was the portfolio snapshot. Is that just like an example and you'd have something that's more up to date? Is that the
Yeah,
plan?
because we recently went through, in 2023, did a capital facilities condition assessment. And so those numbers will be incorporated into this general government facilities plan.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be 2023 numbers.
Great.
Great, I'll jump in with another one. We talked about this a little bit offline, but I just wanted to reiterate. One thing that really jumped out at me on this one was I'm not clear for the zoning code changes that we passed last winter that had all the new incentives, some of which are towards possible facilities that could show up in a plan like this. I wasn't clear which one of them actually did. So I asked for a little bit of a review. When we did those huge like checklist tables for the zoning code, I really just wanted to know which one of these, if they got built, would ultimately end up in this plan, even though they're not here now to be included in that list. So I just wanted to make sure that was on the, I would love to see that.
Yeah, so as noted, Jeff and I from Long Range, we're going to research that and provide that for the packet at the next meeting.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing the plan.
Thank you.
All right. Are people good without a break or 5 minutes? Okay, let's take a quick break and we will be back at 8:05. All right, guys. So next up, we have our study session on the 2025 Fire Functional Plan, bringing up Ami Corconi.
Thank you, everybody. We are returning tonight. As you know, at the last meeting, we had our public hearing, received public comments. We didn't get anything new after the hearing was over with, so there's no new written comments. So tonight, we wanted to go back through the issues matrix, see if there's anything else that needs to be answered, or if we can start to close all of these out, and then ask for the Planning Commission to approve the report that was in your agenda so that we can continue on our journey of getting our functional plan adopted. So I have the issues matrix open right now. Would you guys like to just go back down through them? Okay, so as we know, we've already closed out the first few, but the first one that's open, as you may have seen, we did receive an email from a commissioner who's not here tonight saying that several of these that were her items are actually closed out. Was there any discussion we still wanted to do on any of these, on this one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. You'll
No,
notice.
and to be clear, we discussed last time, so this was just to make sure that it was represented in the report. And thank you for pulling those all into that great table. So I think all of the ones that were left open for that purpose, we can
Okay.
just kind of breeze through and close.
Okay.
It was mostly Commissioner Aparna's, but I had one.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so that one was directed. This one was already closed as well. Everybody just hold on tight while we get seasick here as we scroll down here. Our monitoring and cadence responsibilities, again, we provided some additional context and then showed section, page number, and everything on what we would do. So sounded like that met intent.
Yep, that's great.
And then here we are at one that we closed out with you. And I think this was one that we weren't able to discuss. Yeah.
So Commissioner Van Nymen, this one was yours from our first meeting. Sure. It's number 10.
And it might have been an information clarification, but because you weren't there, we didn't want to assume.
That was fine. I felt like that was kind of answered at the time.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. All right, so then we'll go ahead and close that one as well. And then we had one here from you, Chair Weston.
Yep, and this is the same thing, so thank you for capturing it, and we can close.
Okay, sounds good. And then we had, we added some new ones, and again, I believe this one is also closed.
Yep, this was closed.
He's following here. And then this one here from Commissioner Woodyear.
And that one was closed as well. I thought we closed it last meeting. Or you addressed it satisfactorily. So
Okay, sounds good, perfect, all right. And then this last one was clarifying language in there, and I think we had discussed this quite a bit, but this also was one that I felt like we had closed there. And then Commissioner Coleman, we talked about the vegetation and wildfire management.
Yeah, I think that one was closed as well.
Okay, sounds good, all right, well, we're clicking along, that was the last one. So,
Great. So what I'd like to do at this time is close the public hearing for the written comment because that is still open. And at this point, does anyone have any additional comments, especially about the wording and the verbiage in the report? No. Okay. Well, in this case, I look for a motion to approve the Planning Commission recommendation and the report as amended by the Planning Commission on the 2025 Fire Functional Plan.
Just about the fire functional plan, but the way that you presented it was able to give me an even broader overview. So this was a great experience for me to learn about this.
happy to hear that, and the fire department's always at your service to be able to provide that education, and so thank you for that feedback as well.
All right. Moving on, we have staff and commissioner updates with Glenn.
Just the only update I want to highlight is that the September 10th meeting is canceled. The only agenda item we had was the general government facilities plan, but we just need a little extra time to get that finished up to present to Planning Commission. So we're just moving that out to September 24th. And with that, because that's the only agenda item, we're not going to have a meeting on the 10th. So September 24th is our next meeting.
All right, so we'll see everyone in a month. Commissioners, any updates? Nope. All right, in that case, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, then we are adjourned.